At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our keynote speaker. I first met Anne McElhinney in June of last year at the National Right to Life Convention in Milwaukee. Anne is the co-author, as we mentioned, of the Gosnell book and the co-producer of the Gosnell movie, which just opened in theaters. And if I steal your thunder on this, Anne, I'm sorry, but just so you can look around for a minute, how many people here actually have seen the movie since last Friday? Okay. All right. And you know, and I know there are a lot of regions of Pennsylvania that there's not a theater right nearby. I talked to some people tonight who drove 2 hours to get to the closest theater to see the movie. I mean, that's really dedication. Anyway, Ann and I had a very good conversation in Milwaukee last year, and she wanted to do a pre-screening down in the southeastern part of the state, and I worked with our people in the southeastern part of the state, and they set up to have a pre-screening last fall. And she showed us, by the way, we saw the movie last June in Milwaukee. And then she came to Doylestown, and we pre-screened the movie there for an audience this fall. And then she came to a pro-life banquet for one of our affiliates, the Pennsylvanians for Human Life Education Services down in Philadelphia, and gave such a great talk. So, I mean, we've spent a little bit of time together over the last year, and I am not underestimating or overestimating anything about what may happen here tonight. But I can tell you, I am so impressed on so many levels. And Anne, I love you like a sister. I really do. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Anne McElhinney. You got it.
Whatever. Thank you very much.
There's water back here if you need some.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. You're sitting there thinking, where is she going to? I'm hoping that the technology works. You know, and I think you've had some food, and I think you probably need some exercise. So I was going to get people to stand up, anyone who gave me and gave the campaign money to make this film. Wow. Okay, there we go. Okay, we got a couple. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very, very much. 30,000 people contributed to we crowdfunded this movie with 30,000 people from 17 countries, but most of the people were from here. Does anyone here work for the government in Harrisburg? Stand up, whoever works for the government in Harrisburg. Come on. Okay, any of them work for the Department of Health in Harrisburg? Okay, that's probably safe enough actually then. Yeah, okay, that's good. I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start by showing the trailer for the film. Anyone who hasn't seen it, you have to go and see it. And I know people have driven 2 hours. You know what? You've got to do that. This is a very rare moment. It's very unique. It doesn't happen very often. It's very, very tough. It was incredibly tough for us to get to this place. 4 years of my life, none of us ever imagined it would take this long for this movie to come out. And I can tell you, we've had every kind of opposition, and it's not over. And I'm going to tell you more about that in a moment. But for right now, I would like to try and see if we can do this. Let's see. Oh, that doesn't look right. How does this?
All right, listen up. We are looking for anything that looks like drugs or paraphernalia.
Philadelphia Police Department, we have a search warrant. What is that smell?
Man, you gotta see this. Is this normal?
I don't know. I've never been in an abortion clinic before. You are not gonna believe what I saw last night.
How many?
So far, we found over 30 of them. Healthy woman goes into a clinic, comes out dead, and there's no police report?
Files have been moved recently.
Look at this.
You'll be the prosecutor who went after reproductive rights, and you'll be a racist to boot.
You've got a lot of folk who'd like to see abortion outlawed. And this is not going to be the case that gives them an excuse.
Prosecution has offered you a plea bargain, Dr. Gosnell.
Then I would have to admit I was guilty. I'm not guilty.
When you get to the courthouse, you are going to be swarmed by reporters. You ready for this, counselor?
Where is everybody?
When was the last time your division inspected Dr. Gosnell's clinic?
We had instructions directly from Governor Ridge's office not to inspect.
Wouldn't testify in that case about anything. You doubt you'll find a doctor who will.
And you look at the facts, you will see what I see.
An overly zealous Catholic investigator.
Is that what you want to make this about?
There's nothing that man did that protects women or children, and you don't have to be a pro-life activist to see that.
Kermit Gosnell is perhaps the most prolific serial killer in American history. You better win.
Thank you. So the film opened on last Friday, the 12th, and over the weekend became the #1 independent film in America. And since then, we've had all these incredible stories, amazing stories. I knew there'd be a big impact, but not the impact that's happened. And I just got this today, and I thought I have to show it to you. I'll read this first. So this came today. Several mothers who saw the Gosnell movie with us at our private showing Friday night decided to bring their small children to the Bakersfield abortion chamber yesterday. The sight of the children touched the heart of Lainey, a young Christian woman who had made an appointment to abort her baby yesterday. After deciding to let her baby live, Lainey wanted to hold one of the babies. God used to help her change her mind. She agreed to be one of the honoured guests at a huge baby shower, which will be held in December. And if you can put on the screen, there's a photograph of the group that went to the abortion clinic, and that's her. A lot of people, and you can keep the screen up there because I'm going to use a slideshow. A lot of audiences, and I don't know what your experience was, because that's quite a good crowd of you that went, but really everyone has to go. If you can't go, buy 5 tickets. And I'm deadly serious. And if you can afford, buy 20. It's really important, and people have done amazing things. People have driven out of state. People have driven from Canada to see it. I mean, it's just been extraordinary, and the experience has been interesting. What people have done, and I think it'll be interesting to meet some of the guys, you guys who've seen it. At the end, we have credits, and during the credits, we show like all the most crazy things in the movie, which we think if liberals watch, they'd think that's no way that happened. We thought, you know what? We're going to cut you off at the knees right now, and use the actual evidence so that everything that's crazy in it, the turtles, the feet, that's the only photograph we show, by the way. And by the way, for anyone who's nervous out there, I'm not showing photographs. And I think there's a place for photographs, but it's not to force it on somebody. Don't force somebody to look at a photograph that they'll never lose in their brain. You don't force them, but make them want to look. And then they'll go and look. And so what we do at the end of the film, we actually say, the very first thing we say in the credits is that if you want to see a photograph of baby boy A, who's at the very center of this story, then go to the website. So it's interesting, Michael and I have had this, we've met on all these different occasions, and Michael has heard me. I mean, it's kind of funny that I've come to Harrisburg before, but not to talk about this story. I've come to Harrisburg many times, actually, to speak about fracking. And in fact, the reason that I have ever, the idea that I'm up here talking about it at a pro-life thing is completely ludicrous to me. It's so crazy that we ended up doing this story, and the only reason we did was my mother would call it the hand of God. I mean, it's very weird. We made a documentary about fracking. My husband was here in Pennsylvania traveling around with that documentary, had a few days off in Philadelphia, and heard about a court case. I shit you not. And he's a journalist, he's everything about my husband. We go on holidays, and I swear, to like a village, and he'll find a story. This is what he's like. He's always hunting out stories. You know the way if you hear a siren, and you're like, or you hear like, like there's a kind of some kind of a commotion on the street or something, and you think, oh my God, like, get out of the way, right? No, my husband runs towards it because he always wants to know what's happened, what's the news. So in Philadelphia, as you probably know, they reserved the biggest courtroom because it was so newsworthy, this story, that they, of course, imagined correctly that all the journalists from across the nation would have to come and report on this extraordinary story. And as you probably know, because you probably know more than most people, the court was empty. The court was empty the days that my husband was there. There were some Mennonites knitting and witnessing for the children. And then there was a screen. They had a screen. They projected the images of the 47 children that were found the night of the raid on a screen for the jury. And then they had these witnesses who told these extraordinary stories of what they had witnessed to and what they themselves had performed, because he had all of this, he had all of his staff killing children when he wasn't there. And Phelim just said that the thing that he couldn't get his head around at all was the fact that there were no journalists there. And the job of a journalist isn't to decide what's newsworthy. It's you report the news. People need to know what's going on. And I've been around Pennsylvania, and there are people in Pennsylvania who don't know this story. There are people, obviously, in the United States who don't know this story, and that's our intention, is to change all that. And by being a box office success, we will. And sometimes I go to places, I get very cross. I go to places and people say, we need to get this into churches. I want to hit people who say that. You're completely missing the point. This needs to be in the box office. That's how you change people's minds and change people's hearts. A church is for something else. It's not a movie theater. And this movie needs to make or break in the box office. Everything happens there. And it'll go. It's in the theaters right now. And you have to go wherever it is. And I'm not even going to make an excuse for you. There is zero excuse for you. That's it. You just have to do it. That's all. That's the building. That's 3801 Lancaster Avenue. And it's a really weird building. Some of you probably have seen it. Extremely weird. I want to start. I came this morning, got up at 3 o'clock, and I was on the plane. And the whole way on the plane, I was working on what I was going to do tonight, because I've had this thing about coming to Harrisburg. And Michael knows, because Michael's heard me talk about Harrisburg and what I have to say about Harrisburg. So hold on to your whatevers, because I have a lot to say about Harrisburg. And I'm going to start by just talking about the night of the raid, and what was discovered the night of the raid. And don't worry, I am not showing the bodies of children here. I'm not. You're not going to see that. This is what the clinic looked like. That's his office. Sorry. That's another office. That's some of the equipment. That's where he kept the bodies. In the tops, in Minute Maid jars where he cut the top off, and in the freezer. And there were cats there. And there's a photograph of the jars of babies' feet that were kept in the same place that they had medicines and people's lunches. And this weird thing, which Jim Wood, the detective, took a photograph of, up in Eileen O'Neill's office. We got rid of the kids. The dog was allergic. He had it as a screensaver. And it was interesting, actually, the earlier speaker spoke about the Holocaust, and I actually think to me, it's like the only way I can get my head around this story is to it constantly comes up. And Fanny Arndt, as many of you know, who sat through Eichmann's testimony, talked about the banality of evil. It's a brilliant phrase. It's so brilliant, because there was something super banal about all this. They were having a really good time at the clinic. Like, it was a great laugh, like brilliant, like loads of jokes and stuff like that. Like, they joked about farting and all that good stuff. Like, they were having a really good time. And at the end of the evening, everyone got tips based on the number of abortions that they'd done. So everyone was running out with a big load of money. They loved the money. Everyone loved the money. And everyone got tips, like it was great, loads of cash. And here's who worked for him. So the woman at the top in the middle is his wife, Pearl. And Pearl, you'll remember Pearl is the one, and these people were working the night of the raid. Pearl wasn't there the night of the raid, by the way, sorry. Pearl was spoken about in the grand jury. She went in on Sundays to do the difficult cases with him, what they called the Sunday babies, who no one will ever know anything about because all of those children's remains were disposed of and because all the records were disposed of. But we are very certain that the babies that were dealt with on a Sunday were really big babies, up to 9 months. Extraordinary. And then beside her is Tina Baldwin, who is the mother of Ashley Baldwin. Tina Baldwin is the woman who famously brought her 15-year-old daughter to work there. And Tina Baldwin, the child, Ashley Baldwin, the teenager, became the chief anesthesiologist. And, by the way, according to the assistant district attorneys who tried this case and investigated this case, thanks be to God for Ashley Baldwin, because she took her job super seriously and she tried her very best, and nobody died on her watch. That is not the same as can be said for the Delaware girls, Sherry West and Linda Williams, who dispatched drugs the night that Carnamaya Monger died. And the woman in the middle is Adrienne Moten. And Adrienne Moten, I'm going to go back a bit here, actually. So the people he employed had an average of a 7th grade education, and most of them had like a cocktail of either alcoholism, sexual abuse, drug addiction, and very, very serious mental health issues, and hepatitis C. Jim Wood said, you wouldn't let them mow your lawn, let alone give medicine to people. So the geniuses at the Department of Health here in Harrisburg. So let me back up here. I mean, it's really hard to get, it's so hard to kind of get your head around this. It's amazing. So you know that for 17 years, nobody from this health department, no one investigated anything, never crossed the threshold of that clinic in 17 years. During the 17 years that they didn't examine the clinic, Samika Shaw died, a young African-American mother who died in 2000. In 2000. In progressive Pennsylvania. God, I'll tell you, you're not progressive at all. You're like some kind of backwater. It's so uncivilized here. In 2000, she died. And no one from Harrisburg could be bothered to go and find out what happened to her. No one investigated. The state of Pennsylvania paid $900,000 because of a wrongful death suit, a civil action. So that was your money, that's taxpayer money. But nobody bothered they're so busy in Harrisburg moving around paper clips that nobody could bother going to Philadelphia to check out what happened to an African-American young mother. I thought progressives were all into kind of taking care of African-Americans. What is it, Black Lives Matter, is it? Is that it? Not so much, not really. Some Black Lives Matter. Michael Brown matters, the thug. Michael Brown matters. They're going to put a statue up to him in Ferguson, Missouri. He tried to beat a police officer to death in his car. They're going to put a statue up to him, and no one knows who Samika Shaw is. And I have to tell you this. This is a funny story, because it's good to tell funny stories every time I can get a chance. When I was promoting the book, I was up in Fox News, and I was in the kind of the green room and everything. It was a big deal, and I was going to be on with Bill O'Reilly, and I was like super nervous, and I was thinking, you know what, I need to stay super focused. I don't care who comes in or out. I'm not looking at anyone, because I'm going to stay sort of centered or whatever. And Juan Williams came in, and he says, and it's so funny, like you can't make this stuff up, by the way. It was like a miracle that he came in. And he looked at the publicity girl that was with me, and he said, what's going on here? What's this all about? And she said, oh, she's written this great book. She's written this great book about, Kermit Gosnell. Oh, we know all about that, he said, dismissing me. And it was like, honestly, it was a miracle, because I was completely, it just brought me right into the moment. And I said to him, really? Do you know who Samika Shaw is? Silence. And I said, well, she was a young African-American mother who died in 2000, and you don't know who she is? Nobody knows this story. And I just, gone. He was gone, and he just sort of sat there, and I was like, great. And then when I got on with Bill O'Reilly, and he sort of said something, I remember thinking, that was exactly the point to make, that nobody knows who this woman is. And so nobody bothered from Harrisburg. And then almost a decade later, and you couldn't pick these people out. You know the progressive poster children? Progressive poster children. African American, oh God, poor African Americans. And then, what about, refugees, that's the other one, refugees. We just love those refugees, not so much. So almost a decade later, Carnamaya Monger, a Bhutanese refugee who had spent 20 years in a hut with a corrugated iron roof, 20 years in Nepal, came to America. She was here 4 months, and she died in that clinic. And still nobody from Harrisburg bothered going to check out what happened to her. She was dead and buried, and no one from here did anything. And the only reason anyone knows about her, or the only reason that Kermit Gosnell is in prison, is because of the drug deals, because he was selling prescription drugs, or prescriptions to drug dealers. And a fabulous detective called Detective Jim Wood, a proper Catholic and a proper human being, just started to investigate, and he found out about Carnamaya Monger. And I love what the ADA said, Christine Wexler. She said about Jim Wood, he was Carnamaya Monger's champion. He was the only one. And I say this all over the country, by the way. I constantly talk about Harrisburg. Harrisburg is like one of my things now. And I say, if I have time tomorrow, I swear to you, I really want to go. Or I want somebody to take a photograph of that building and send me a photograph of it. Because here's what I say to audiences. People say, why are you conservative? I'll make it super simple for you why I'm a conservative. They should go to that building and empty it. Get everyone out. Then they should burn it to the ground. And they should bring in a little, like a trailer, like a little small caravan with 2 desks in it. And then they should go to a homeless shelter or go to a bus stop, pick up 2 random people, and say, you know what, we're going to have you guys run the Department of Health for the state of Pennsylvania. You know what? They'd do a much, much better job. And if you ever needed even more proof of how appalling these human beings are, how despicable they are, and I really mean that. I mean, these are despicable human beings. And I don't believe the culture has changed at all here in Harrisburg. These despicable human beings, 2 of them, now actually I'll wait to go on to that, but 2 of them, yeah, I'll wait to that. I'm going to come back to that. Don't worry, it's always there with me, Harrisburg. Adrienne Moten worked at the clinic, and she famously took a photograph of baby boy A, who's very much at the center of this whole story. He's very much the baby that put this man in prison forever. And I think one of the things, again, that lady who spoke earlier talking about the Holocaust, and I have a photograph here somewhere, and I suppose, in fairness, I started doing this presentation at about 3:30 in the morning, so, there'll be a little bit of confusion, but I'll get to everything eventually. But do you remember the film Schindler's List? Do you remember there was a child in it? It's washed out, it's all very washed out and sepia tinted, and there's no colour in it, except for this one little wee girl, and she's wearing this little red coat, and you see her being marched by a Nazi officer. And it's just a scene, and you just see that, and then you don't see that red coat until later on in the film, when you have the liberation of Bergen-Belsen or Auschwitz. And there is this mass grave, and in the middle there's a red coat. And people can break their heart over one child. It's very hard to break your heart over 1 million. And in the end, I think it's really important to tell a story of the life of one child. And one child can change the whole world. And I think this child, baby boy A, could change the whole world. He has converted people already. Look what happened, look what happened to those women who went to that clinic. And I have had, you cannot believe the number of stories of people who've written and who have said that they've changed their mind about abortion just by coming to know this story and watching this movie. It's incredible. So he was born, and as I said, the hand of God. I mean, there's an incredible amount of providence going on here. Baby boy A shares a birthday with my own father, so July the 12th, and baby boy A was born on the July the 12th, 2008. And he was very big, and he was alive, and they threw him into a Tupperware container, and he curled up, and 2 people took a photograph of him. Adrienne Moten was one, and Karima Cross was the other one. And Karima Cross got up on the stand and was talking about baby boy A, and describing how he moved. And they said, would you stand up, could you stand up and show us what he did? Can you imagine how chilling that was for the jury? And she stood up and showed how the wee fella had curled himself up. Because apparently, and you guys know this better than me, I mean, I'm so new to all of this. I'm on a massively, extraordinarily steep learning curve here. But little babies like that, little ones, little preborn ones like that, they feel really cold. And they also don't like bright lights. So they like to be kind of in a cool, in a warm place and with the lights low. You can imagine the treatment this little fella got. And he was alive for quite a while, long enough for them to take photographs of him. And Adrienne Moten took a photograph, and then she kept that phone. And when the cops eventually caught up with her, she had kept the phone. She had a new phone, and she went and got the old phone. And then they had to retrieve that photograph and they sent it to Quantico to get the photograph. And I've interviewed her, and I remember saying to her, what was it like? It must be terrible to get arrested. And she said, I wasn't arrested. I was rescued. And she said when she was in prison, I said it must be terrible to go to prison. You know the way I said, God, imagine just terrible being in prison. And she's had, a lot of these women have had very, very broken lives, had very, very difficult, like she's had a very, very, very tough upbringing, been through the system, a lot of, so it didn't bother her at all, the prison. And when they went into the prison, because that whole thing of honor among thieves, all the other women, you can imagine, were like shouting all kinds of abuse at them. And I said, oh God, that must have been terrible. No, it didn't bother at all. And I'm like, did anything, what bothered you about being in prison? And she said, and of course the big thing is you don't control the lights in a prison. And they would turn the lights out, and she didn't want them to turn the lights out. Because she said, I would see him. And immediately I thought she meant Gosnell. And she said, no, I would see baby boy A. And all I could do was say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And these are the Delaware girls, Sherry West and Linda Williams. They were there the night of the raid. And I'm telling you this because it's very important, because I'm going to come back to these idiots in Harrisburg who are much worse. Idiots is far too nice a phrase to use in relation to them. So those two women were there. These are the two that Jim Wood said you wouldn't let them mow your lawn. And these are the two that drugged poor Carnamaya Monger to death. And poor Carnamaya Monger, I was writing the book and reading the testimony from the trial and speaking to people who were there and witnesses to her last days. And it only struck me, the way you could read something for a while and be thinking about something for a while, and then suddenly something tiny just triggers something in you. The whole thing that everyone who was in the clinic and who was there for Carnamaya Monger, everyone mentioned this thing that she started to put up a fuss. This is on the last day. She started to put up a fuss. And it struck me that Carnamaya Monger didn't speak English. She could say hello and, good morning, thank you, or whatever. Like she had literally maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 words in English. And this is a woman who had lived in a refugee camp. She had seen hard life and hard times. And she's in this clinic in America. And it must have struck her. It must have suddenly struck her. I mean, she must have looked at these two and thought, oh God almighty, I'm going to die here. And tried to escape. And they phoned Gosnell and said, she's putting up a fuss. And he famously said, met her up. Met her up. And they knew what that meant was to fill her up with Demerol. And the poor woman, she never woke up again. Liz Hampton, look at this. Seriously. I've interviewed Liz Hampton. She is a violent alcoholic. That's her own description of herself. And then Tina Baldwin. Tina Baldwin, as I said, the mother of Ashley Baldwin. And Tina Baldwin was actually done for, one of the crimes that she was done for was this thing of, corrupting the morals of a minor. And Pearl Gosnell. And Pearl Gosnell was a big shopper. So their house was also like a Hoarders episode. The clinic looked like a Hoarders episode, and their house looked like a Hoarders episode. And she was a massive shopper. Like there was loads and loads of boxes of stuff that wasn't even opened, like shoes and stuff like that. So this brings me back. So can you believe this? This is what I did this morning. And I think it's pretty brilliant, by the way. So here we go. This is the night of the raid, and I hope this makes sense. Do you see the two dolls at the bottom? The two women at the bottom are Augustine and Barsney, 2 nurses. Those 2 nurses accompanied the police, the FBI, and the DA's office on the night of the raid of the clinic, right? They sent these 2 nurses because obviously there'll be patients there, to make sure the patients be okay. So those 2 dolls went into the clinic. And I mean, of course, I'm not going to find the part I was looking for. And I'm not even going to try. Oh, yeah, well, actually, there's a piece. Yeah. The cops used the words, the team members would describe the scene to the grand jury using such words as filthy, deplorable, disgusting, very unsanitary, very outdated, horrendous, and by far the worst conditions that these experienced professionals had ever encountered. So the two nurses are there in that scene. There are cats walking around in the procedure rooms. There is a smell of death, and there is a smell of human feces because the toilets are backed up and people are actually urinating in the hallways. And there is a filing cabinet kind of thing where he has the severed feet of children in jars. And so these two are there. And there, of course, are women lined up for abortions. And a couple of them start to get really angry because they want to have their abortions. And why are they not proceeding with the abortions? And there's about nearly 15, 20 people on the raid. DEA, FBI, DA's office, Philly police, these two dolls, and a woman from the Department of State. And so those two women were incapable of making a decision about the situation, about the woman who wanted to have an abortion right then. This isn't even in the grand jury. In the grand jury report that was published, this story isn't in it, but I'll tell you one thing, it's in our movie, because I thought it was incredibly important that people would know this. Those two couldn't make a decision, so they phoned the better, they phoned the superior, they phoned the higher up. Because these two nurses couldn't make a decision in that situation about what to do. Are you with me? So they phoned the higher up, Cynthia Boyne, and they all have these amazing titles, by the way. They all have these really, really, really long titles. Cynthia Boyne, Pennsylvania Health Department's Division of Home Health. That's only part of it. By the way, home health, by the way, whatever. Anyway, they phoned her. She's the one with responsibility for abortion clinics. And that genius, Cynthia Boyne, she couldn't make a decision either. So she had to phone a higher up, another phone call. So she phoned the big chief, Janice Stolowski. Whoa. Who's really brilliant, who's a brilliant person, clearly. I put the ladder there because she's so brilliant that she got to the very top. She's the bureau head of the community licensure and certificate. And guess what they decided? Let him keep going. Make sure he goes ahead and does the abortion. There were cats walking around. According to those nurses reported that he was reusing instruments, that the place was filthy, that there was dust on everything, that there was blood on the floor, that the patients who were there were heavily sedated by people who were not qualified. But guess what? He needed to really make sure he goes ahead and does the abortion. That's your Department of Health. God help you. And you know, it's funny actually, given my background, because I did this documentary about fracking. And you know those environmentalists? Their favorite thing is, it's about the children. They're always worried about the children, and they're so worried about health, and they're really worried about the water quality, and they're so worried about the children. God between us and all harm, as they say in Ireland. Anyone who talks to you about it's for the children, God grab your children and keep them close, because they're a danger. This Department of Health couldn't care less about children. But my God, they care about abortion. They care about abortion so much that they let this guy go ahead and do another abortion because it was so important that it was done, and done right then, in a place where there were cats walking around and reused instruments and people who weren't qualified. That's who runs your Department of Health, God help you. That's why I'm a conservative. There shouldn't be a Department of Health here at all. What are you doing with the Department of Health? What's it for? What do they do? I have no idea what they do. Seriously, what do they do? And the idea, and I mean, loads of them were sacked. Of course they were sacked, people were fired, people took early retirement, which is a great idea, by the way. You completely screw up your whole job, and then you get this lovely, pensionable pension and lovely security. I mean, you know, only in a progressive state could you have something as mad as that. It's unbelievable. And I don't believe for a second that the culture in that Department of Health has changed. Not for a second. What, like why would anyone think it had? And for me, what's really hard for me is to think of a nurse. You know that thing where they make you do word association, you know? It's like nurse. Like, what comes into your mind when you think of nurse? My conception of what a nurse has taken a big blow in this situation. Those nurses, who are they? They are the most despicable human beings. I've met Gosnell, and I've been in the prison with him. I get him. I kind of almost get him. These are the people I don't get, who have their own children and their beautiful houses and their car and their weekends and the barbecue, but they couldn't give a shit about poor people in that clinic. What's that thing that George Bush said? Brilliant thing. The soft bigotry of low expectations. These are despicable people. And by the way, it's really hilarious. You know, when the grand jury met, and Christine Wexler, who is a rock star, by the way, one of the ADAs who was involved in the investigation, she brought in the nurses because there were nurses from the Jefferson School of Nursing who went in there and did, you know, internships. And she interviewed them, right? She interviewed them. She's a rock star. She interviewed them, and she's like going, "Why didn't you say anything?" And they said, and you know, and you can imagine what they looked like, these ones, pretty little blondes, right? And she was like, "You see the way I'm referring to myself as a pretty blonde there? You see that? Like putting myself in that category. Check that out." And she said, and she'd say to them, you know, like, "Why didn't you tell anyone? Like, why didn't you do anything? Like, what did you tell anyone? Did you go to the police?" "Oh, well, I just thought," and this is what they said, "I thought that's how things were in an inner city clinic. It's okay for blacks, basically." And Christine wanted to hit her. I'd have hit her. I'd have hit that girl. Yeah, I need to not be let out, honestly, seriously. It's awful luck I'm flying off tomorrow, by the way, before that Department of Health opens up in the morning. And it's funny, you know, when I was writing the book, I wrote to the department, just on the issue of change of culture. When I was writing the book, I wrote to the Department of Health and asked questions about the people involved in this investigation, the people involved, those nurses who went the night of the raid. I asked them a set of questions. I'm a journalist, I'm an author. They refused. They have never answered my questions. The Department of State in Pennsylvania, the Department of Health in Pennsylvania, the Department of Sanitation in Philadelphia, the Jefferson School of Nursing, all of which are in receipt of taxpayers' money. And they refused to answer my questions. Not only did they refuse to answer the questions, they said, "You can try. You could just go ahead and try to ask us those questions because people have tried before and no one has succeeded." Like they were really proud of it. Like they're really delighted with themselves. You know, go ahead with your wee questions there because we're never answering your questions. This is who you have in the government here. You know, in those huge buildings. Thousands and thousands and thousands of despicable people. I mean, I don't understand them. I can't get it. And with this case, by the way, it's name upon name. And by the way, I have books with me. And I have a very small suitcase. And I'm not taking any of them back. And all the names are in here. Because I'm kind of curious. I presume people here know some of these people. They must live here. Stolowski. Cynthia Boyne, these people must live here, you know. Unbelievable. I'm going to leave that for a second, but don't worry, I'll come back to it. So when I was writing the book, and actually Steve Massoff is not in the movie. He's not represented in the movie. So there's all these people who worked in the clinic that had that kind of these very broken women, people with basically no education. But then there was this guy, Steve Massoff. And I know he's from here. Now, there might be people here who know his people. And, you know, I'm a bad Catholic. You know that? Catholics are the only ones, by the way, who use an adjective in front of themselves. Like, it's the only religion. Like, Jews don't say bad Jews. But Catholics say bad Catholics, and I'm one of the bad Catholics. But anyway, I am a bad Catholic, but when I was reading Steve Massoff's testimony, it brought me back to prayer. Because it's the worst thing I've ever read. So he was a doctor. He's one of those people who couldn't get into medical school in America, and he went to the West Indies or whatever. He came back, and could not get a residency and started working in a pub in Philadelphia. And you know, if you believe in God, you have to believe in the exact opposite. And very unfortunately, he had a brother-in-law who was a pharmaceutical rep who worked, who you know, had a relationship with Gosnell and said they were short-handed. And this guy got to work in Gosnell's clinic and as a pretend doctor. And his testimony is just terrible. He called himself a fireman in hell. He said he ran with scissors. He said this under oath. You know, under oath, on the stand. And by the way, you know, and get this, like, this was not newsworthy, by the way. This wasn't every day on the news across America. A fireman in hell. I ran with scissors. There were just so many of them. And he said that the blood ran down the walls. That's how he described it. And for those of you worried who haven't seen the movie, trust me, we don't show anything like that in the movie. We show nothing in the movie. We were very careful about that. The book is not like that. But you're going to buy it anyway. And it's just, he's serving a very lengthy prison term, I think, you know, 12 to 15, I think. And I've written to him and he never wrote back, which is very interesting, actually. Gosnell will be writing letters to me till my dying day. And when I told you about the teenage girl who worked at the clinic, that was her cheat sheet. So she created this cheat sheet. I've got to be very careful how I say that, because if you say it really fast, it's not good, right? So this is her way of working out what to give people in terms of anesthesia. So she would look at people and say, a bit of the yellow and a bit of the blue. And it's very strange. I was telling this story I don't know, do you know who Mark Stein is? So we showed the movie at the Mark Stein cruise just about a week ago up in Canada. And you know, I was telling this story about this and about the cheat sheet and all that. And there was an anaesthetist in the audience. And when we, you know, did a Q&A at the end, he stood up to ask a question and he broke down in tears because it had a terrible effect on him, because of course he could read it and understand it. And he just, you know, he just found it extraordinary. Again, back to the Holocaust, you know, this quote is ascribed quite often to Bonhoeffer, but apparently it may not even be Bonhoeffer who said it, but I still think it's brilliant. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. And that brings me to Governor Tom Ridge. So Governor Tom Ridge, as you might know, is a Republican and a Catholic. And Governor Tom Ridge has his hands all over this thing. So he ran, as you know, in Pennsylvania on a pro-choice ticket. And once he won the governorship, he put out an edict, hands off the clinics. And they took it seriously. So 17 years they didn't inspect clinics. He's been very quiet about this case. I don't believe I've heard anything that he's had to say about it. But I like to tell audiences about Governor Tom Ridge and his part in this. And all of these other departments as well, as far as I'm concerned, it's not to act is to act, not to speak is to speak. How these people, how they ignored the death of Samika Shaw, how they ignored the death of Karna Mayamonger. And it's all documented. I have it all documented in here. It's like, you know, it's extraordinary how these people operate. And how they have no decency. They've no decency. They've no civility. They've no human decency. And it's interesting, the night of the raid, there's these three guys in there. There's this huge crowd of people, right? But then there's Jim Wood, who started the whole thing, who's this undercover narcotics officer, who's just amazing, a beautiful human being, who really has done me good, because in the middle of all of this, it's a really nightmarish story to spend time on. If you didn't meet all these wonderful people, which I do meet lots of amazing people. But in the middle of this story, there is Detective Jim Wood, this undercover narcotics officer. There is Jason Huff, young FBI officer. And there's Steve Doherty from the DEA. Those three guys, who know nothing about medicine, by the way, we're all three kind of going, I don't think this guy should be doing anything. I think everything should stop now. I think there should be no more. So those guys had the civility, the decency, the humanity to realize, do you know what I mean? And they're there then with the experts. They're there with the Department of Health experts. I cannot get my head around it. I cannot get my head around it. There's no explaining it. It's evil, is what it is. And it's abortion. And again, like the pastor said, if any, I mean, it's really funny, when we started doing this, because we had been done by 3 documentaries about environmentalists, and we have, plenty of trouble with them now, you can imagine. And I remember somebody saying, when we had started this, they said, you know no trouble till you don't know any trouble now till you start going after abortion. And my God, is that true? Is that the truth? And nobody would need anyone to have that ever explained to them again when they saw how that poor man was treated, Brett Kavanaugh, and how his family were treated, and how those howls, those demonic howls from the gallery, like, I mean, it's like, so I sort of said, the good news is that there were these great law enforcement officers. That's the really, really good news. Detective Jim Wood, Jason Huff, and Steve Doherty. And the 2 ADAs, Joanne Pescatore and Christine Wexler, who did the investigation. Now, when the actual case came to trial, Christine Wexler actually went on to a different job, and it was Joanne Pescatore and Ed Cameron, and they were just amazing. And the other really good news is that Gosnell is in prison forever in Huntington, and I think we have some people here maybe who know a bit about that. And I visited him there, and he's a creep. That's all. And he's, he's really, really evil. He lies all the time, and he's just extraordinary. He's the most extraordinary affect. Because you can imagine, I mean, if you imagine a normal person in prison and never, ever going to be ever free again, you can imagine what your demeanor would be like. And this guy's demeanor is like a guy who has just played golf. And he's talking about, it's great, I've got time now for music. And he really likes music. And that creeped me out big time, because he talked a lot about Chopin and how beautiful Chopin, but he talked about how good, he talks about himself in the third person, he's really narcissistic, he talks about how incredibly intelligent he is, and that if he hadn't been a doctor, he could have been a concert pianist, and all about the Chopin and all of this kind of stuff. And then he started talking about, when I'm listening to new music as well, I'm listening to, he really likes Jacques Brel, the Belgian crooner, I love Jacques Brel. And it's like, he's sitting there and then he used to do this brain freeze thing, he does this thing of, what's the name, What's the name? But instead of doing that with his hand, he put his hand on my leg. He'd put my hand on my leg all the time. And I'm sitting there with my husband, right? And by the way, it was an open visiting area, and he pulls his chair right in so that he has his legs like that, and my legs are in the middle. Do you know what I mean? So I'm completely trapped. And then just keeps putting his hand on, I'm sorry, and kept doing it. He's very controlling. He's very clever with people, very manipulative, highly manipulative. And he's good at judging people. And that's, of course, how he survived as long as he did. That's how he got away with it for so long, because he's plausible. And then he does this Jacques Brel thing, and I'm thinking, and he's like, what's the name of the song? And I'm thinking, do I say it? And I'm thinking, whatever. And I said, Ne me quitte pas, which is the really seriously famous song that he wrote. And he then goes and leans in right into my face and sings in French. Don't ever leave me, as my husband sits there, He sang twice. And then he talked a lot about his feet, and there's been so many weird things. Like he talked about, he told me that he had visited Auschwitz, and he described, interestingly enough, he'd been to Auschwitz, and he described Auschwitz in a way that I have never, ever heard anyone, he used an adjective I've never, ever heard anyone use to describe Auschwitz, and the word was impressive. And he found Auschwitz was very impressive. And then, what was also really impressive was the really large container with all the children's little shoes. And, as this case unraveled, the fact then, you've got so many layers. As I said, I find it more disturbing, all the people that enabled him, and all the people that then enabled the silence around this story to continue for so long. And the media were incredibly complicit in that. In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And my God, are we living in those times. And this guy, J.D. Mullane, one of your own, was a real hero here. J.D. Mullane is the guy who went in, he's the local journalist, who took a photograph of the empty press benches. And that photograph went viral. And basically, people started putting that photograph out and saying, where are the journalists? Where's the New York Times? Where's CNN? Where's NBC? And that photograph was published on April the 11th. And the next time that the court sat was April the 15th. Fingers on the buzzers. Does anyone else know what else happened on April the 15th? Correct. The Boston bombing happened. So the journalists came and they went just as quickly. It's quite extraordinary. There'll be a prize for you, for sure. No, you got your prize already. You got your prize already. You're in the courtroom, so you remember it. You know, and at the same time that courtroom was, you know, basically empty in March, you know, earlier in the case, you had Jodi Arias was also on trial in the United States of America. Everyone remembers her because we got wall-to-wall coverage of that story, and she's the girl who murdered the boyfriend. He was Mormon. They were in the shower. There was a whole sort of sexual thing. We got massive amounts of information about her. And of course it's terrible that that boy died, that the boyfriend died. But that Gosnell was on trial at the same time and no one knew anything about it, it's the most unbelievable dereliction of duty. That's the picture from Schindler's List of the little girl. And I think it's important in this story to tell a good story and not just make up a story, but there's a beautiful story in the middle of this, which I think is worth telling, because for those of you who are just feeling like, it's so bad. There's a story of the one that got away. That's what I call her, the one that got away. And those of you who saw the movie will know that we obviously make quite a big deal of the one that got away. And it's a true story. So the grand jury here in Pennsylvania sat for like over a year. And the grand jury, as you probably know quite a lot about it, given the fact that you've had this massive grand jury report recently as well, is regular people coming in with their shopping and their knitting, whatever, over a long period of time and going through evidence to try to work out what crime has occurred. And this was a complicated case, so they needed a grand jury. And everyone who was involved in the grand jury process in this case really commended the grand jury for their tenacity and their courage, because it was really hard. You can imagine the awfulness of what they heard. They heard awful things all the time. The evidence is terrible in this case. It's just terrible what people witnessed to. The stories are terrible. We don't show any of them in the movie. You hear a little bit about some of them, but we really don't go into detail. And then one day, a girl came to give evidence, and it was Christine Wexler who questioned her and said, like, what's your story? And she said, well, I was going there for an abortion. And she was very pregnant, and it takes 3 days. So you go the first day, and they put the laminaria in, they come out, go the next day, more laminaria, and then the third day. Right. So she's there the first day, and Gosnell put the laminaria in, and then she said, what happens to the babies afterwards? And she was 7.5 months pregnant. And he said, we burn them. And she went home, and I think she had started as well to really recognize, I suppose, that there was a baby there. And she told her cousin, and her cousin phoned Gosnell, and Gosnell said, you're not getting your money back. And I don't do reversals. And then Christine Wexler said to her, what happened then? And she said, oh, my baby started kindergarten today. And the grand jury all stood up and applauded. And it was the first time anyone had ever heard of that. And just if you think that that's the most extraordinary story, it just gets really much more extraordinary with the movie. So we went to Oklahoma City to shoot this film, and we did not have an actress to play that role. And, it was, anyway, whatever, we didn't have somebody, right? So we're in Oklahoma City, and we're like, okay, we need an actress for that. And it's a small part in the movie. And Nick Searcy, who's the director of the movie, is having waffles in a Waffle House, and he sees a waitress, and he says to her, I'm a big-time director and everything, and, I've got this movie, and, I'd really like you to be in the movie. And she's like, oh, yeah, right, do you want me to go back to your apartment there and we'll talk about it? Is that it? Oh, yeah, I haven't come down in the last shower kind of thing, right? So anyway, he said, no, I'm going to go and get the script, and I'm going to come back or whatever. And they had kind of good rapport. She ended up being the actress in the film. And the first scene that she shot was the last scene in the movie. So the next scene was a scene in the grand jury. And so it was shot out of sequence. And I had spent a lot of time with her the first day on the set. We're just chatting, hanging out. And then the second day she comes back, and she's like, oh my God, come here, Anne. She said, I've read the script now. This is my own story. And I said to her, what do you mean? And she said, I was in Houston a few years ago. I was having an abortion. And the nurse came in, and the nurse said to me, here, oh, listen, why don't you listen to your baby's heartbeat? I have to go out here and do some stuff, but I'm coming back. And left her alone. and she said, oh, I just put my clothes on. And I just got out of there. And so she told me this, and I'm like, my jaw's on the floor. But every day, by the way, every day we had stories like that. We had the most unbelievable stories. So I told my husband, and he said, go back and ask her, could you film her telling the story? And so when you're doing an interview, some of you probably know this, when you ask a question, you leave lots of air, particularly in something like this, leave a load of air, because you never know what the person might say. So she basically said, she told that story, and she said, I put my clothes on, I went out to the car with my granddaddy, and I said to him, let's go. And he said, fine. And then I just didn't say anything, and then she said, and by the way, it's online. This interview is online, so, Tessa Watley. And she said, and now sometimes I lie awake at night and watch him breathe. And he's 5 years old. I can't believe I was going to destroy something so precious. There was a whole generation of me. And then she did a thing. I had said to her when we were interviewing her, I said, don't look in the camera, it's weird. You never look directly in the camera, look to the side. And she looked directly in the camera and said, don't kill your babies. It's unbelievable. It's the most unbelievable thing. So the film came out last week. This is the premiere. And there's Dean Cain is in it. Earl Billings plays detective, plays Gosnell. And that's my husband and our business partner, McElhinney, who did it all. And then people have been sending in photographs from all over the country with their tickets. And obviously all the people who have not seen it are going to go and see it. But here's what's been happening to us. So the mainstream media are continuing to ignore the film. So First Man, which came out on the same day, has 280 reviews. El Royale has 150, Beautiful Boy has 69, Happy Prince has 60, Goosebumps 2 has 47, and we have 6. Of those 6, 2 are mainstream. And of course, the mainstream ones, they hate the film. They just hate it. And we've also had problems with theatres, and I'm going to explain that in a minute. But here, just quickly, for those of you looking, this is where it's on in Pennsylvania. It's on there, and there, and there. Right? So, and anyone who wants that list, all you've got to do is go to gosnellmovie.com and put in Pennsylvania. So basically, I know it's not on State College. Nowhere near State College, right? No? Yeah, well, anyway, everyone has to go and see it. You have got to go and see it. It's very, very important. We have had a situation where, it's quite amazing what's happened. So, we're in theaters in America, and where there's like 30 screens, right? And we're like the 8th most profitable film in that complex. And guess what they're doing? They're dropping the film. In lots of places, they're dropping the film, even though it's making loads of money. So they're dropping the film, even though it's making them money. We have stories coming in from all over the country where people are going to the theatre, there's no poster up, it's not on the marquee, and the person selling tickets is telling them, you should go and see Goosebumps instead. Or go and see The Nun instead. So people are being, we have actual stories from all over the country where the actual cinemas are going after us. We tried to advertise on NPR and they wouldn't take our money. We tried to advertise on Facebook and they rejected 50 of our ads, including an ad that just has Tucker Carlson, a screen grab of Tucker Carlson talking to Dean Cain. When we started this, we started our crowdfunding campaign with Kickstarter. Kickstarter wouldn't allow us to describe what Kermit Gosnell did. They wanted us to try and do a crowdfunding and not say what Kermit Gosnell did. So we were raising money for a film about a guy who did a thing. We have had, at every point of this, we have had the most unbelievable opposition. It has been relentless. And I thought when the movie came out, I thought, phew, now we can sort of, no. So I can't tell you how important it is that you buy tickets, that you go to the local theatre, that you demand the film, that you buy tickets for other people, that you go to the local school. Here's a good one. Go to the local school and find out if they showed An Inconvenient Truth. And say to them, you know what? That's politics. This isn't even politics. This is just something that happened in Pennsylvania. I think high school students should know the history of what happened in their own state. So get those high school students, and any of you who have money, say, I'm paying. It's very little money. It's very little money, and say, you know what, I'll bring them. I'll bring the kids. Get them all to go to this particular show, any night. And priests that are out there, and people, leaders religious leaders, tell people off the pulpit that they should go and see this. Because I can tell you, it's saving lives. And it's such an incredibly powerful film. We just can't believe it. In one cinema, actually, sorry, in 2 different cinemas, there was a priest in one and a pastor in a different one. And when the film ended and the credits came up, no one moved, and everyone sat there in complete silence. And then the pastor stood up and said, does anyone want to pray? And everyone stayed, and everyone prayed. Yeah. I'm not going to talk anymore about Janice Stolowski. Maybe I will. Yeah. The uncaring attitude of Janice Stolowski, head of the Department of Health's Bureau of Community Licensure and Serviture, who was ultimately responsible for overseeing the care in all Pennsylvania abortion clinics, angered and appalled the panel. According to the report, Stolowski readily acknowledged many deficiencies in the Department of Health and her own oversight of abortion facilities, but her dismissive demeanor this is the grand jury, her dismissive demeanor indicated to us that she did not really understand or care about the devastating impact that the department's neglect had had on the women whom Gosnell treated in this filthy, dangerous clinic. It's just beyond belief. I'm going to stop there right now. I think I've talked too long. I could talk an awful lot more. I mean, there's so many stories to do with even the making of the film. As I said, there was meeting Tessia Whatley. We had all these extras as well. I mean, we paid for a bunch of extras, and then we didn't have enough extras, so we said, look, does anyone want to be an extra? People drove in from out of state. One man drove in from out of state. His girlfriend had aborted their twins without telling him. And it had such an impact on his life as a young man that he became a pastor as a result. His whole life was completely altered by it. Another woman who was an extra in the film, I spoke at a church in Oklahoma City, and in Edmond, actually, and it's really weird. Like, I'm sort of there, and I spotted this woman. I spotted her. I had her spotted from the get-go. I just thought there's something wrong with her. And at the end, people came up and chatted, and then she stayed to the side on her own and wanted me to talk to her. And then I talked to her, and she said she worked for Hearn, if some of you know who that is. She worked for Hearn in Boulder, Colorado, in the late-term abortion clinic there for 20 years. And I can tell you one thing, she looks like she did. You'd spot her in a crowd, I swear to you, anyone would spot her in a crowd. She has a very, very particular look. And she said the worst story she ever heard was, and she said it was the one that shook the whole clinic. But it's amazing too, like, anyway, what will shake them. But anyway, that a couple had gone there healthy, well off, in love, pregnant, with twins. And they trucked up and said, we did some research, we've looked it up, it wouldn't suit us. It just wouldn't suit us, We've done all the research. Twins. And they aborted healthy twins. It's just, and I do think it's important, I mean, and I think something that the pastor said earlier was very, very important. You might have noticed I have an accent. So I think an awful lot of pro-lifers across America have this whole thing about Roe v. Wade ending and thinking like that's going to be some whoopah, like brilliant, like some kind of success. It's zero success. In fact, your situation could get much, much worse because the people will be asked to vote. And guess how the people in Ireland voted? And I can tell you one thing. A story will change people's minds. I cannot emphasize enough how important this movie is. Political speeches don't move many people. And a story will change your whole life. A story changed my whole life. The only reason that I'm pro-life, I don't like the phrase pro-life, I'm pro-baby. The only reason I'm pro-baby is because of that baby, because of this story. A story changes people. And I can tell you the people in Ireland do not know what they voted for. They have no idea what they voted for. And the reason they don't, because no one ever told them. Because it never came up in the debate. It never came up in the debate. It's great to talk about pro-choice. Sure, who's not pro-choice? Choices are great. I love Costco. I mean, that's what it's about. People, choice. I'm all about choice. I love that. This is about babies. It's all about babies. Are you for babies? Like, you're what? You're not into babies? Like, what is wrong with you? Have you ever seen a sonogram? Like, be really careful and don't get complacent and don't think that all your Christmases have come at once because of Brett Kavanaugh. It's only the beginning. It's only the very beginning. People's hearts have not been won. You should have seen them in Ireland. I can tell you, I don't recognize the country where I'm from. I don't recognize it. I'm glad my parents aren't alive to see it. They drank champagne. They danced. They danced in Ireland. And by the way, if anyone wants to read the very, very best thing ever written about the Irish referendum, read John Waters' First Things, an obituary for Ireland. We went backwards to Calvary in the name of progress. It's the most incredible piece of writing. He's a beautiful, beautiful writer, a beautiful person. But, and I remember I went home in the summer, and we have a house there, and I was sitting outside, and the woman next door came in and said, "Isn't it brilliant?" Exactly like that. Isn't it brilliant? And I'd fail, and my husband's like looking at me thinking, because, you know, random acts of violence, you know. But I haven't hit anyone yet, but God, am I close. And I just said to her, that's a really odd word to use for a law that will allow people to pull a child out in pieces, that they'll break children in pieces. It's an amazing phrase. Now, she immediately started to suck back in the words, you know what I mean? But she really did mean it, though. She did mean it, though. You know what I mean? I made her stop and think, but she meant it. And they all meant it. And they danced because they have no idea what they were dancing for. They have no idea what it was about. They have no idea what nightmare that's been visited in the country. None. Zero. It's like the crucifixion. It's like Jesus Christ. They, you know, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. It's awful. It's just a nightmare. Anyway, I'm gonna suddenly stop. I'm going to sign books. As I said, I have no bag to take them home with, and I would actually recommend the book. The book is everything. When we started doing this story, and we came here to Pennsylvania, we went to Philadelphia to interview, you know, everyone that we could. We started hearing stories and thinking, you know what? None of this stuff can be in the movie. You could never put that into a movie, but it should be recorded. It really should be recorded. And I'm really glad we did, even for the sense of the fact that that story, for example, of the night of the raid, no one knew that story. Or no one knows the story of a Muslim man here in Pennsylvania whose wife, and I think there was some kind of marital difficulty or whatever, she was pregnant with twins, and she went and aborted them at Gosnell's clinic, and he reported it to Homicide, who never did anything. I mean, the book is full of stories like that, and I just feel like there's an enormous number of questions that have not been answered yet about this case. And here in Harrisburg, excuse me, of course you're lovely, but I'd love to know, I know Tom Corbett sacked a bunch of people and he made a few flowery statements, and I know that they did change the law and that the abortion clinics are being inspected. But I just wonder about the mentality of the people there. I just wonder about their hearts. I wonder, was there ever a meeting together of those people to say, what is wrong with us if we can't be about this? And in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, that the most vulnerable amongst us were not protected. Like, I don't know what kind of a moment they've had to process that, and I just don't believe anything's happened. I would be very shocked if it had. I'm going to suddenly stop. That'll be me. Thank you.